I got a job working for a Fortune 10 company at 20 years old with no high school diploma or college education. Don't tell me you can't move. Don't tell me you can't leave your city. Don't tell me you can't ask that girl out or go for that job or build that business or start that podcast. That's bullshit. You only can't because you're choosing not to.
My mom has stage 4 cancer in her bones and in her breast. My dad's disease was 15 years, he died of ALS. I made a podcast about death, seemed like the thing to do. And if you're sad by all of this, well, you're gonna die too.
Hello, everybody. Happy week to all, or sad week to y'all, depending on how you are feeling. If you're new, it's Chels. If you're old, it's Chels. If you've been here, it's still Chels. My name's Chelsea London Lloyd, and every week we talk to people who've been impacted by grief, specifically the loss of parents and siblings. We also have oncologists, funeral directors, therapists, comedians, actors. Basically, this is the intersection of the entertainment and wellness industries, etc. It has been a summer off of pod sharing, but a lot going on behind the scenes, banking episodes for this season and next season, and talking with some of my favorite comedians. I can't wait to share more on that soon. I've been going through a lot in this place called life. I have a new kind of grief with the form of heartbreak. My partner and I of 7 years have just recently ended things a few weeks ago. So that is an unexpected twist of fate. And it's been extremely challenging. I shared a post on my Instagram on Monday and I used the hashtag breaking open. Maybe breaking up is breaking open. I hope so. Breaking open sounds a little more positive, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's really challenging to navigate a shared home. We've had so many life experiences together through VR, through comedy, through Judaism, through our families, weddings, birthdays, traveling, connections. We're still living together for the next few weeks to a month, so that's fun. Living with your ex. I should totally start dating. Hey, pick me up. Come meet my ex and the dog. I did find a dog on the side of the road a couple months ago, so I am still living with her. I am absolutely in love with her. I'm very hopeful. I'm dedicated. I'm training her. We're doing all of the things. I also didn't envision my life doing it by myself, so I'm trying to be really nice to myself, but I'm not sure what's going to happen. I'm really, really overwhelmed, and I will share I'm in therapy twice a week right now. We just started daycare for her, which has been helpful because she has separation anxiety, so she's howling when she's by herself. So the daycare is allowing me to get my errands done and have some independence back. She couldn't go right away because they had to have proof of vaccines, which took about a month. So I don't know if this sounds like a lot, but it's been a lot. We also had a homeless woman coming to our door every single day. We had the cops at our place like 3 times in a week. She was harassing all the neighbors on the street, going up to everyone, charging her phone, saying weird things, trying to break into cars. And it was really stressful. I have a lot of empathy for people who are homeless or living on the street or who are housing insecure, but this was just really painful. And she was at our door and I couldn't leave my house and I had to take the dog out to pee and potty train and call the cops. And if you're like, wow, that sounds like a lot, are you okay? No, I'm not okay. That's why I'm doing this podcast. But for real, just normalizing that life can be challenging. It's okay to not be okay. I'm not fucking okay right now, but I'm still showing up and talking about death because death is still happening every single day. And the more we talk about it, the less horribly painful and uncomfortable it has to be. While it will still be horrible and painful and uncomfortable, I hope that we can feel those feelings together. Hence, Dying of Laughter was born in January of 2020, ironically, 2 months before the world started grieving collectively. But here we are. I'm trying seasons this year to take the summer off for my own mental health, and we'll see how that goes. But for the next 12 weeks, we have 12 weeks of content coming out, and I'm really excited to share all of that with you. I'll share some sneak peeks in just a moment. But to end on a positive, real talk, life is, it's exhausting and breakups and I'm crying all the time, but there's good things happening too. I just got back from Santa Fe doing a stand-up festival at the Cloud Top Comedy Festival. Got to go to New Mexico for the first time, see the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, connected with my friend Larkin who moved there. Beth Stelling was the headliner. She is super sick, so that was cool to see her perform live. And I got to do some new sets for new people. So that's something I'm excited about. And I have several weddings coming up in Montana and Maui and the wine country. What? I've never been to a wedding by myself because I've always been with my partner. So that feels uncomfortable. It's also expensive, but it's also beautiful. So holding all the space for that, those are my updates. And I also shot 2 commercials in the past month, which I can't wait to share with you when those come out. Hopefully you see them. And it's just really exciting when your dreams come true for that one day and you get to do all of the things you've been working on for years. So those are some cool things that have happened. I did shoot a few movies earlier this year. Those probably won't come out until 2023 or even 2024, but I will keep you updated. So that's the very, very large, those are the broad strokes of what I've been up to. If you're brand new, I'd recommend popping over to the first episode, which is called Growing Up Around ALS and Breast Cancer. That talks about my experience where in elementary school, my dad was diagnosed with ALS and my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. My dad died of ALS when I was a freshman in college, and my mom's breast cancer has returned to stage 4 metastatic, so she is combating that today. And the first episode goes into more details about who I am and why I do this podcast. So, yeah. Are you depressed yet? Or are you here for a ride? If you are grieving or experiencing anticipatory grief, please feel free to DM me at DyingOfLaughterPodcast or shoot me an email at DyingOfLaughterPodcast@gmail.com. If you want to share your story, tell me about your person, vent, cry, laugh. I love voice memos. You can definitely DM me a voice memo. And if I don't respond right away, feel free to follow up, but I will get back to you. And I love connecting. So that is an open invitation for those listening. Today, everybody, we are speaking with Michael Unbroken. We are talking to him about his mother who died of an overdose and his 2 best friends who were murdered. He is a trauma coach from Indianapolis. He has a lot of exceptional online content. He has his own podcast, so definitely check him out. On the interwebs, his podcast is called Think Unbroken, Trauma and Mental Health Healing Podcast, learning how to heal and overcome childhood trauma, narcissistic abuse, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and so forth. So yeah, give him a Google, Michael Unbroken. He inspires the heck out of me. He's like, okay, no excuses. Here's how to work through bullshit. He's overcome a lot of traumatic things in his life. Losing both a mom and your friends, overcoming life's biggest challenges, losing over 100 pounds. He has so much to say in the mental health space and how he is not a victim himself, having gone through a very traumatic childhood. You will hear more in this interview. Watching his mom fall face first into the potatoes at Thanksgiving in front of his girlfriend when he was young. There's a lot of nuggets, good, bad, ugly, funny, and everything in between. And he inspires me to get back up, to get back the fuck up, because life is a bitch and if you let it be. And he keeps it moving and grooving, and you will get your butt kicked in this interview mentally. And I hope it inspires you to get back off the ground after life's knocked you down there. Sneak peek. This season, we have an episode about losing your twin brother at 23 to an accidental overdose. We have psychedelics for grief. We have a rabbi. We have 2 sisters who lost their dad to 9/11. We have an episode losing your parent right after giving birth. We have what it's like being diagnosed with cancer at the beginning of the pandemic. We have the founder of a natural deodorant company and how that relates to breast cancer. So really exciting stuff. I've been working hard all summer to get this ready for you guys and to launch it into the world. And I'm as excited and nervous as anyone else who identifies as an independent solopreneur, entrepreneur, podcaster, creator, human being, whatever the fuck I am. All of those things. So again, this week We've got Michael Unbroken in just a moment, and stick around for next week, hanging out with Rabbi Sydney Mintz, exploring psychedelics for grief. Thank you so much, Michael, for being here. I appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure. I'm excited.
Me too. It was cool doing your show. I love a good show flop. A show swap. A show flop? Show,
I hope
not
not
a
a
flop, because it was a win.
Okay, great. Don't you put that on me, Ricky Bobby.
You're like, that was anything but a flop. You also have the best video setup as to anyone I've interviewed in the past 2 years. So shout out to you.
Well, if you're not first, you're last. Two Will Ferrell references back to back.
Wow, that's pretty good. I'm wondering what the third one is going to be. I feel a third.
Maybe it'll be an Easter egg. I'll drop it in the show.
Oh my goodness. I love that. Well, I know that you've been through a lot of things, and I'm excited to talk about your different stories with grief and how that intersects with the work that you're doing. We're here today honoring your mom as well as your friends. I'd love for you to share in your own words a little bit more about your upbringing, who you grew up with, where you grew up, and if you could walk us through the timeline of your story with grief.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll give you the elevator pitch, obviously, so we're not here all day. When I was 4 years old, my mother, who was a drug addict and alcoholic, she actually cut off my right index finger. And so that starts to give you context, right? My stepfather, super abusive, the kind of guy you pray is never your stepfather. And I never met my real dad. I spent the majority of my childhood homeless and in poverty. In fact, by the time I was 10 years old, I lived with 30 different families. I got high for the first time when I was 12, drunk at 13. By 15, was expelled from school. I was selling drugs, breaking into houses, stealing cars, and hurting people. And luckily got put into a last chance program. Still did not graduate high school on time. And in fact, basically, they just hand me the diploma and they're like, you just got to get the hell out of here. And so I found myself at 18 years old, just thinking about, like, what am I supposed to do with my life? I had all intentions of going to the military. I was like, that's my only plan, right? That's where a lot of kids who grew up where I grew up do. And I hurt my knee and was not able to get in. And so I was like really in a tailspin, 18 years old, heading into 19. And I was like, oh my God, all right, cool. Well, what's the solution for poverty? Well, it's got to be money, right? Like, it's got to be. And so I said to myself, well, by the time you're 21, I'm going to make $100,000 a year legally. Now, this was super important because my uncle was in prison for life. I've been in handcuffs. Most of my family's been to jail. Today, my 3 childhood best friends have all been murdered, and that was due to drugs. And I just was looking at life as like, I got to do this legally. And so sure enough, I landed a job with a Fortune 10 company. Has them heading into 21, no high school diploma, no college education. And I started making money. And that thing happened that people always tell you will happen if you've never had money before. And it destroyed my life. And I found myself in that period. I lost my mother. I lost my grandmother. I was 350 pounds, smoking 2 packs a day, drinking myself to sleep. And that's when I put a gun in my mouth. I was just over it. You know what I mean? I was just like, man, money was supposed to fix this shit. It didn't. What is going on? And I put myself in this very precarious situation. So I wake up the next day and I'm laying in bed. Again, keep in mind, I'm 350 pounds. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm eating chocolate cake, smoking a joint, and watching the CrossFit Games. Like, if that's not rock bottom, I don't know what is. I really don't. And so I looked at myself in the mirror and I was just like, who are you? What are you doing? And I asked myself the most important question I ever been asked. And I said, what are you willing to do to have the life that you want to have? And the words no excuses, just results, just started reverberating through my whole body. And that became this really interesting catalyst to stop negotiating with myself. And I put myself in this position of saying, all right, let's get to it. Let's figure this out. Let's heal trauma. I didn't have the words for it then, but I was like, I'm going to go take therapy seriously. I'm going to go get a coach. I'm going to read the books. I'm going to go listen to the Tony Robbins audiobooks. I'm going to do all the things. And 11 years later, here I am talking to you. And so it's this really incredible, like, journey from like looking at life from this scope of pain and suffering and death and torment to looking at it through really a lot of its hope And a lot of it's real as like I'm a realist at heart. A lot of it is me just looking at life and going, has anyone ever done something kind of like what I'm trying to do? Yes. Great. That means I can figure it out too. And that's kind of been the catalyst for my life. I never intended to be in the position I'm in my life, in my career, in my anything. By all means, your zip code is more indicative of the level of success you will have in your life than anything else. And I should be dead or in jail, and yet I'm not. So, so much of what I'm always thinking about is, what does it really mean to be the hero of your own story?
That was really, really well said. I appreciate you sharing your journey with listeners. I think it's extremely inspiring to hear what you've been through and where you've come from and how you are standing here today helping other people, mind you, follow their own dreams and focus on what they can accomplish. Can we go back for a second to growing up? You talk about your zip code having an indication as to your success. Can you paint the picture a little bit more for listeners about your experience growing up? For those who might not understand the concept of your zip code representing you later on in life, I'd love for people to understand what your childhood looked like and how you were feeling then.
Yeah, totally. Let me put it this way. I'll never forget the day that the water company came and turned our water off. I mean, we were that poor. We were the most poor. I grew up in America. I grew up in Indianapolis. I grew up in a city. And we were so impoverished because my mom and my stepfather were using the money for drugs and for alcohol and for who knows what. And the water company would come turn our water off. And the electric company would come turn our electricity off. And the gas company would come and turn our gas off. And we would get evicted. I've been evicted like 15 times. I have no idea. I've lost count. Our clothes would come from like the Goodwill, and our food would come from donations. And, it was crazy to me when I would be in these situations. Like, most kids loved childhood. Like, I would see children like having fun, and I'd just be like, I don't relate to this in any capacity. I don't get it. I don't see it. Like, whatever this is, whatever this joy is, it doesn't correlate with my experience. The most terrifying moment of my day was when the school bell would ring and I had to go home. And that's something that, that was true from 4 or 5 years old all the way till the time that I was like out of my neighborhood. And, it's funny because you hear in passing like these things like, oh yeah, they're poor, they can't afford this, they can't do that. And I don't think people really understand it unless you're a part of it. And I would have to steal food to survive sometimes. Like, I would literally go and steal food. And between these bouts of being homeless, I mean, one time I was like, I don't know, 11 years old. I was by myself for 2.5 months, just by myself. No idea where my mom had gone. No idea where my stepfather was. And so, a lot of it is not only those aspects of it, but just the brutal abuse that we would go through. And that comes from now in my understanding, obviously with all the education I have in it, from this centrifugal generational trauma, looking at the things that I suffered through and going, oh, well, yeah, that's learned behavior. My mother suffered these things. My stepfather suffered these things, and their parents before them, until we go all the way back. I'm biracial. I'm Irish and West African Nigerian. And so I go, well, shit, that explains a lot of it. Right. And so it was always this context of survival. Right. And if I wasn't surviving at school because I was bullied and I wet the bed and all those things, it was surviving home because I wasn't allowed to be myself ever under any circumstances. The most dangerous place to be me was in my home. And so I just learned how to turn off. I learned how to become a robot. That's why when I was a kid, I was selling drugs. I was hurting people. Like, I never shed a tear over it. I never got emotional about it. I was so disconnected from the human experience because of what was happening in my home. And you look at these things and you go, oh, it's no wonder that 79% of people in prison were in the foster care system, right? It's no wonder that people there's this thing called an ACE survey, adverse childhood experiences. There's no wonder when people answer yes to a certain number of those questions, they're more likely to commit suicide or be an alcoholic or be obese or smoke cigarettes, all of the things that I did. And so, the measurement for our childhood is such a indicative factor for what's going to happen in our adulthood. And then there's that, but then there's also, there's the abuse, there's the homelessness, there's the poverty, but then there's the death around me. My uncle was decapitated in a drunk driving accident. The first funeral I went to, I was 5 years old. Like, I'll never forget, and then looking at, my friends getting murdered, and my grandmother like killing herself through drugs and alcohol, and my mother effectively doing the same exact thing. And you go, this is a epidemic. This is a pandemic. Like child abuse is the real pandemic. Like I say that to people all the time, because it's this thing where it's right here in front of us and it touches everybody. Right. And childhood trauma and abuse isn't necessarily even that physical thing. It's the teacher in third grade who's like, you colored the moon purple. Who do you think you are? Right. And it carries through, and it's the pain. There's so much to it. And growing up in that, here's what's really fascinating that also I don't think people really understand. It's normal. It's so normal. You have no idea how normal it is. When you look at the fact that statistically, per the ACE survey, again, Adverse Childhood Experiences survey that was done with Kaiser Permanente, Dr. Folletti, and the California Center for Disease Control, it's estimated that 83% of all people in America suffered an adverse childhood experience. I would argue it's probably much higher, probably closer to 95%. You consider non-reports, you consider, not having reporting analytics, not having children who can say when bad things happen. Because, the worst thing that happens in homes where there's abuse is that it's found out, right? So, you measure all these things and you go, it's just normal here. And so that's what my childhood was like. It was normal. Pain, suffering, loss, anguish, homelessness, poverty. I didn't know anything different.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you going into these details. You also touched on one question that I do ask all of my guests, which is about your goldfish moment. Your goldfish moment is the first time you thought about or conceptualized death in some way. For some people, it was a goldfish. Can you talk a little bit more about what your experience like was losing your uncle and how that affected your point of view today?
Goldfish moment. Did your goldfish die? Goldfish moment. Did it make you cry?
Yeah, so it was funny because going to that funeral, it was closed casket. And the only thing that I remember that struck me so vividly is that the adults put all of us kids in this room. It was right after New Year's. And like the Charlie Brown, like New Year special or something was on television, right? And like all the kids are supposed to be there watching. And I'm like, this is weird. Where are all the adults? And so I just walked around and was just listening, because I was always a curious kid. It wasn't mischievous. It was just curiosity. And I was listening to the conversations and just the unbelievably crude things that people were saying about him. And just being like, that's interesting, because he's not here. Now, I didn't grasp the concept of death. I didn't understand it at that moment. That's awfully young. And that would take a couple of years. But in that moment, particularly since you asked the question, it was kind of like looking at it and going, oh, he's just not here anymore. And the thing about, I'll tell you the moment that really became my goldfish moment, which I think is a phenomenal analogy. The first time my grandmother had a stroke, I was the one with her at her apartment to call 911, and I was 7 years old. So I went through that whole process, and her flatlining and dying in the ambulance while I'm there, and like that whole thing. Now, she came back to life in the ambulance. I should say that. She was resuscitated. But looking at that and that becoming this really fascinating precursor to every time I had like a bump or a bruise or a weird emotion or feeling in my body, I was like, I'm going to die. Right. And so there was a lot of things that I had to do around that. So, it's interesting to me. Like part of me sits and I go, I embraced the concept of death, but I watched pain take everyone that it took. And so I kind of have this secret, I guess not a secret, I'm going to tell you, but I have this thought constantly. I'm like, I just want to die in my sleep. That's it. I got no request for I've suffered so much. It's like, I have no request for the universe except one. Let me die in my sleep with no pain, please.
That's completely valid. I feel like that is, something that a lot of people hope for and that we could wish upon most people. And yet I wonder what the statistics are of how many people actually do die that way compared to other causes. I feel like it would be smaller than you would think, unless we're talking about old age. When you talk about disconnecting from society at a young age, I wonder, what was it like reconnecting to society? You talk about the moment that you were at rock bottom, but could you share a little bit more about transitioning back to day? Because you're wildly successful and have all of these things going for you now in your business. And I wonder what it was like when you first had that epiphany, when you first were turning the leaf. Can you talk about those early days? Hey, popping in here to share how much I've personally benefited from individual counseling, specifically virtually. During the pandemic, I opted for online therapy. I'm not going to lie. I thought it would be really fucking weird. At first it was, until I found the right fit. I feel that the right fit in therapy is so important. And yes, a bit of an eye roll that you have to try 2 or 3 people, but hey, it's like dating. The first one's not always the perfect fit. And I was lucky enough to find the perfect fit right away. I used BetterHelp myself. This was before I partnered with them, which is affordable and private therapy virtually. You can do couples therapy, individual therapy, text therapy, phone therapy, or Zoom therapy. I did Zoom. If you're more into a phone moment, that exists too. But I know that therapy is time consuming. A lot of people listening to this are busy gals, guys, and folks on the go. I remember when I went to in-person therapy in Los Angeles before the pandemic, oftentimes I'd have to reschedule due to a last-minute audition or work obligation. With virtual therapy, I've found that I can always find an hour in my week, and you can even reschedule online if something comes up. There's an easy-to-use platform similarly to Calendly or Acuity where you just pick your own times. I feel like you guys have heard me mention the benefits of therapy time and time again. So I'll try not to repeat myself too much, but just truly, when I lost my dad, there was so much going on. I never went to therapy until years later when my mom was diagnosed, and I only wish that I had gone sooner. Now going through a breakup, I'm in a very vulnerable place and I need regular support from a licensed professional. My friends and family have been awesome, but it's beyond what they can provide, in my opinion, due to how much heartache I'm going through regarding this grief. So if you'd like 10% off your first month, you can try it at betterhelp.com/DOL, as in dying of laughter. So the letter D is in dog, O is in ostrich, L is in love ya. Yes, I just threw that in. It's just a service I genuinely believe in, and I wanted to pass that on to you. So whether you try BetterHelp, an in-person therapist, or you find another way to express yourself with a licensed professional.
Yeah, well, I don't think I was ever necessarily disconnected from society. I think I was just in the wrong places. You know what I mean? I was with people where, and look, respect, I get it. We were kids, but it was always partying, always drugs, always 4 o'clock in the morning weekends, drinking on our lunch break, that thing. And, when I started to turn the corner, like, it was, I'm 26 when I make this declaration to myself, but it's a couple of years before things really start to kind of take shape. Part of that was because I was like learning who I was for the first time. You know what I mean? Part of it was very much like, I don't know who I am. I don't understand humanity in any capacity. I'd learned to be totally and utterly numb to everything emotional. Like, I was as close to a sociopath that you could probably be, because it was literally beat out of me. There's no other way to explain it. It was beat out of me. I wasn't allowed to cry. I wasn't allowed to be an emotional human being. So that became really step one, right? Step one. I mean, I literally didn't cry for 15 years. Found out my mother died, didn't cry. My grandmother died, didn't cry. I cried briefly when my grandmother died. And then I was like, immediately like, sucked it back up, right? You've seen cartoons like the tears go down, they go back up. It was kind of one of those moments.
Yeah.
And then even in finding out my friends had been murdered, like nothing, right? And so I think the biggest thing about stepping into society, which I think is really a phenomenal question, it was, can I connect as a human being? It took me from that moment of like this breakdown, this mirror moment, right, to 29. So 29 and a half, basically another 3.5 years before I started feeling like I could have a conversation like I'm having with you right now, because I started getting serious about doing the work. And that became a big catalyst for recognizing being in the wrong group of people, right? The support wasn't there. The things that I think we need if you're in a healing journey weren't there. You'll never forget this. I was sitting having dinner with my then 3 best friends and telling them like, okay, guys, I'm just going to like give you some of the insight to the chaos of my life. So maybe you understand why I'm a psychopath sometimes. And one of the guys, in the middle of the deepest depth of conversation that I'd ever had in my life, this is 7 years ago, right? Takes out his phone to check the score of the game. And it was that moment that I knew everything that I needed to know about my friend. And so that became a really interesting thought for me, because I was like, I could either continue to have walls up with human beings, or look at it and go, actually, I'm just around the wrong people. It's not that they didn't serve me for the time. It's not like there wasn't value in that. It's not like I'm saying, go throw all your friends away. That's chaotic. You don't want to do that. But you do need to take inventory of it. Like, what is really happening? Because it's kind of crazy to think about all this death and to not be emotional about it. And then to have this moment about where you're finally able to do it and being ignored, right? And so the thing is, like, I'm always thinking about the people in your life. Like, are they people who are supportive in your journey? What is it that they bring to the table for you? And these friends, right, as you're reacclimating, for me, or acclimating for the first time into a normative society, was going, okay, what kind of person do I want to be around? But that being predicated, that question on what kind of person am I? And so I had to do a lot of work. I had to do a lot of, like, for lack of a better term, coming to Jesus moments with myself, right? And really kind of figuring some shit out, because ultimately it came down to this: who I am is a reflection of my environment. My environment is not a reflection of me. And that became one of the most profound things as I started to get into connection with other human beings. And that a lot of that came with me saying, I'm willing to be vulnerable here, because if I'm not, I'm going to just keep being stuck.
I think this is really, really incredible. I'm so glad that you're talking about this. And I hope you talk about this on a lot of your podcast interviews that you do, because it's really interesting, all of the things that you've overcome. And that's not to compare people's human experiences. Everyone has been through something, but it does seem like you've been through a lot of things at a young age. And the fact that you're able to get through them, I'm wondering what gave you the strength to not just have these epiphanies, but then to take action. Like you said, seeing a therapist and losing weight, and then eventually starting a business, after that. It almost feels like it's just incredible. It's like you did it. You're such a great example as to what can happen. And I resonated with what you're saying about no excuses. So I'm going to ask you about people making excuses second. But to dot my own I here, how did you manage to do it within a matter of years? Therapy was first, and then you went from there. What was that process like?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And look, I want to say this too, because people get caught up when they hear my story and they go, oh my God, somehow this dude knows something and he's a fucking Superman. I'm not. I don't know anything that you don't know. I promise you. But I can also promise you I work harder than you. And that's because I want to be better. I want to be different. I want to go and create life out of all of the chaos, because, you can sit here and look at it and blame the world and play the victim, which I certainly did. I'll raise my hand. I'm always you don't get to where I was without playing the victim role, period. And the truth is, like, we're not culpable for those bad things that happened to us. It's not your fault that you had shitty parents. It's not your fault you were homeless. It's not your fault. Like, when you're a kid, you don't have control, right? But there's a point in your life when you're 18, 32, 64 years old, where you have to look at your life and go, oh, wait, I'm self-imposing this destruction. I'm the one doing this. And that's a hard, hard, hard pill for people to swallow, because they don't want to look at it. And the thing that led me to where I am, and look, success is a measurement per whoever it is that wants to define it for themselves. Like, I don't get caught up. Like, I'm never going to have a Lamborghini. I highly doubt I'd ever have a mansion. I'm certainly never going to do a lot of the things that people do with money and success, because it doesn't interest me. And so success to me is defined by impact. And so what I think about a lot of different things I've accomplished in my life, they all started with this. I'm stubborn as hell. Like I really am. And that is both my greatest attribute and simultaneously my greatest character flaw. And because I know that about myself, it gives me the ability to kind of tread water in a couple of different ways. And it helps me create space to ask myself, like, am I actually doing the thing I'm supposed to be doing? And so when I set something into my mind, it's non-negotiable. And that's what's really fascinating. When I said I stopped negotiating with myself, I meant it. That doesn't mean there's not impact of like relationships and people and career and business partners, because that always exists. But, I'll give you a perfect example. I wrote down a goal 7 years ago, and I just had it come to pass. 7 years ago, I wrote this down.
Congratulations. Can you share what the goal is, or is that?
Yeah, I was to be a guest on this podcast called Entrepreneur on Fire.
Amazing.
So if you're an entrepreneur, you know this podcast. It's the #1 entrepreneur podcast on planet Earth. 7 years ago, I wrote down a goal. I will be on that podcast. And it happened.
Can you share, how did it happen? Did you reach out to them? Did you meet them? Did you pitch them? Did they find you somewhere?
Well, it's a series of events, right? So it starts because I made this declaration to myself. What am I willing to do to end generational trauma in my lifetime? That's my goal. That's the mission. That's why Think Unbroken exists. While I understand that's far-fetched and improbable and unlikely, I'm stubborn. So what does that mean? What do I have to do to make that happen? Okay, cool. I need to create content. I need to create media. I need to write a book. I need to be on podcasts. I need to host podcasts. I need to speak around the country. I need to speak around the world. I need to speak in front of 10,000 people. I need to speak in front of 2 people, right? I got to do whatever it takes to reverse engineer that goal. Well, to answer your question, because it does require context, a couple of months ago, I got the opportunity after reading this book called The 10X Rule by this guy called Grant Cardone, who's a billionaire, to speak off is what it's called. It's like basically the Shark Tank of what this guy was doing in front of 10,000 people to win an investment from Grant into a business.
Amazing.
I won that investment and I beat those people, and I spoke in front of 10,000 people, and he invested in my company. A goal I had written down every single day for months come to fruition.
Wow.
So now I'm starting to look at life. I go, okay, cool. So keep speaking, keep doing the things for the last 11 years that nobody saw you do, that nobody still sees me do. Keep going. And I got the opportunity to speak at another event in Dallas in June this year. Well, this is actually a critiqued being judged competition speaking event. Well, the guy who happened to be my judge of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who did this, when I made the top 10, was this guy called John Lee Dumas, who just so happens to be the host of the #1 entrepreneurial podcast on planet Earth called Entrepreneur on Fire. And John, who is also an incredible human being and mentor to me and friend, now, right, months removed, live in front of all these people, goes, "You're going to be a guest on my show." It's almost impossible to be on John's show.
Wow.
And it took me 7 years to make that moment happen.
Wow.
All these little goals along the way. This one.
I have chills. I'm so excited for you. Has that interview come out yet?
Yeah, it's out. It came out 3 weeks ago or something, I think. And here's the crazy part. We just sat down and we had dinner together last week. And then I had lunch with him last week. And, it's one of those things where you go rewind my life 7 years, you go rewind my life 10 years, you go rewind my life 15 years, 20 years, whatever. I always just said, if I can just focus on these things that I want to do. Think about this. Like, for context, like, I really want people to understand this. I got a job working for a Fortune 10 company at 20 years old with no high school diploma or college education. Don't tell me you can't move. Don't tell me you can't leave your city. Don't tell me you can't ask that girl out or go for that job or build that business or start that podcast. That's bullshit. You only can't because you're choosing not to. And that's this is what I'm saying. Come back to that victim mentality. So much of it is about belief. So much of it is about what you allot yourself to have. I look at my life and I go, it's unlimited what I can accomplish in 25 years. People are so caught up on today. They're like, oh my God, my TikTok didn't go viral. Who gives a shit? What are you trying to build? Who do you want to be? What do you want to create? It's right here for you. It's right here, but nobody's going to care for 27 years. So how bad do you want it? And I'm so stubborn, Chelsea, I'm so stubborn to end generational trauma in my lifetime. I will do whatever it takes.
It's apparent in the best way. And I love that you're self-aware, like what you're saying about, yes, this is my biggest flaw as well as my biggest attribute. It's relatable to sit in the victim mentality in sense that we all do that. It's so much easier to say, oh, he or she or they got this because of this, or they're lucky. For me, it comes out of my comparison spirals, right? I'm like, wow, she might have worked hard, but she also was very lucky. Why am I saying that? Why does it matter? Whether she was or wasn't, that's me subjecting myself to victimhood as to why it didn't happen to me. When it's A, not my business. B, it doesn't matter. And C, it's really just a way to keep yourself stuck because you're saying, well, they got it, so there's not enough room for me. I'm a huge believer that there is room for everyone, but it has to do with your mindset and how bad you want it and what you're willing to do, just like you're saying. So thank you for sharing these examples as to how you took the bull by the horns and got there.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't see it, but in front of me right now on my screen, it says mindset is everything. And it's so true because I'm going to tell you right now, like you can do it. You can literally do anything. And people always, it's such a faux pas thing to say. It's so empowering. You can do anything. Go believe in yourself, whatever. Believing in yourself carries no weight if you do not move with intention. And that's the thing that people get lost on. They're like, well, I believed I was going to go and do this thing. Did you actually show up? Did you actually leave your house? Did you get on the train? Did you suffer? Like Jewel, I love Jewel. Great example. She lived in her car. How bad do you want it? How bad do you want it? For context, I spent $250,000, every penny I have, to get healthy.
Could you talk more about that?
Tens of thousands of hours to get healthy. Therapy 3 times a week, group therapy, EMDR, CBT, Gestalt therapy, men's group therapy, all the A's, AA, NA, SA, just trying to understand it. I have over 30 certifications in trauma-informed education, thousands of dollars. I've learned from Gabor Mate and Besser Vanderkolk and Pete Walker. The list goes on and on. Tony Robbins, Brenda Burchard, Tom Bilyeu. Like these people are in my life. Like I'm learning from them. It costs money. It costs effort. It costs energy. I'm not a millionaire. I don't have anything. I stay poor, but you know what I mean? I'm always investing in myself. I still go to therapy. I still have a coach. I still go to personal development seminars. I'm always in it because I'm trying to build this thing. You have to ask yourself, what are you willing to do? And look, it's hard because we look at our lives and the comparison thing, I get it. But I just go, well, look at all the suffering I've been through. Look at all the pain I've been through. Look at all the loss. People in my life I'll never get to talk again. My best friend, the last thing I said to him was the meanest thing I could ever have said to him. And that was nothing because I ignored him. And then he got murdered. And so I sit here and I look at my life and I go, okay, cool. You want to create impact? You want to change the world? What do you have to do to take care of yourself first? And that means investing, therapy, coaching, books, seminars. Some of you guys are going to hear this, but like, you invested $250,000. Yes, I have. And I'll invest more, whatever it takes. And you're scared to invest $2.50 a late fees at the library to get a book that could change your life because you're trying to get it all right now. And that's what's so hard. But I didn't start at that. It started with me like before I had money. I was borrowing money. When I started this, I borrowed money from my girlfriend to pay our rent so I could spend my money to go to therapy.
Wow.
How serious are you? What are you willing to do? And it's hard because people look at that and go, that's embarrassing. Is it? I don't know. Maybe. What does your opinion of me have to do with anything? I could care less what you think about me, because the most important thing is how I feel about myself. When I look in that mirror, am I making the right choices? Am I making the right decisions? Am I living life within my values? Am I keeping true to my boundaries? Am I leaving an impact because I choose to? Right. And we get caught up. You're worried about Stacy over here judging you because you can't go out and have drinks with her on Friday night because you spent $75 for BetterHelp. Stacy probably ain't your friend anyway. Why are you worried about her?
Shout out to BetterHelp. Do love BetterHelp way more than Stacy. So I love this analogy. I think your mindset is incredible. Can we just take a moment to acknowledge and appreciate your mindset? Because even you sharing all of this as to how far you've come, I think there are other people who have spent this money and who have spent years developing themselves, and they don't even have the mindset that parallels what you're talking to right now. So I think what you have going on is really special and unique to you. And I'm glad that you are sharing your message with others, because there's people I've talked to on this show that have also spent the money and have these programs, but they don't talk like this. Have you been told that your mindset is really exceptional? Because I mean, I'm just saying that as a compliment. I'm just taking it all in. I think it's amazing.
And I appreciate that. And thank you. Let me say this. I think part of the reason people don't do anything with that stuff is because they actually don't understand mindset. They don't understand what it actually means. So I'd like to create some context here. This is actually the first thing I teach people when I coach them.
Ooh, please. Okay. That sounds interesting to me.
You take this thing here called a pen. I know you're listening. So you get a pen and you get a piece of paper, and you take this pen and you use it on the paper and you write this down. It's the most important thing. I swear to God, it's the most important thing you'll ever do in your life. If you really listen to what I'm going to say, you're going to write down, I am the kind of person who is kind to myself. I am the kind of person who is kind to myself. Here's why. What you think becomes what you speak become your action, and your actions become your reality. And when we come from these backgrounds of shame, guilt, judgment, and you hear you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not capable enough, you start operating through that scope. And here's the really interesting kicker. You're saying things to yourself right now that if you said to me, I'd punch you in the face for, or that you would get arrested for. Seriously, think about that. And yet you're trying to have success in your life, but everything starts with, I'm a piece of shit. That's not going to work for you. So guess what? Now you're moving through that and you're like, oh, wait, I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not being kind to myself. That reflects my actions. That has now reflected my reality. Okay. So now we rewind and we go back to this idea about kindness. I am the kind of person who is kind to myself. So that means when you're operating through that scope and you're convincing yourself that this is real because it's going to take a long time, you're going to start moving with actions and intentions throughout that scope of kindness. You're going to measure what you're doing against that. And on a long enough timeline, the things that you want in your life will come to fruition, thus your reality, thus the self-actualization. You can do all the work in the world. You can read all the books. You can listen to all the podcasts. You can go pay Tony Robbins $1 million for a one-on-one session. Your life won't change until you start being kind to yourself. And that's mindset. Mindset has nothing to do with belief about the things you can accomplish, because you're never going to do them if you're an asshole to yourself every day.
I'm obsessed. Can you talk about the fine line between self-confidence and what is perceived as self-righteousness? How do you combat those two things?
Yeah, I think it's all about your values. I really do. I think it's all about your values. Who are you in the world? Who do you choose to be? If you're listening right now and you don't have values, you don't know your values, you got to stop listening to this right now and go and figure that out. My values are very simple: honesty, kindness, self-actualization, leadership, and no excuses. Those are my values. I would think it's fair that I'm being honest right now. I think it's fair that I'm being kind right now. Kindness and honesty do not mean that I'm being rude. It just means that I'm telling you the truth. And so what I think about often is people get caught up in this idea about self-righteousness because often it is a reflection of their own inadequacies. They go, oh, you think you're better than me. I'm not better than anybody. I promise. I'm not. The only person that I'm ever comparing myself to is myself. It's a literature narrative. It's a me versus me narrative. Comparison isn't going to help you. It's not going to make your life better. And so that place of self-righteousness, if you have that thought internally, you're not operating within your value system, and you're out for your own best interest, right? If other people are telling you that, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. You need to do some introspection. But ultimately, what it really comes down to is if you are operating throughout the scope of your value system in alignment with the mindset of kindness, you're never going to be wrong, no matter what other people tell you.
That is awesome. And I love the way that you speak about yourself. It's interesting when you can identify qualities in someone else that you wish that you had. Like something that I talk about in therapy is when people are really, really confident, there are things that can rub me the wrong way personally at times. Like, okay, well, if you're so confident or X, Y, Z, you don't have to tell me. Like, you should just like be okay that we know that about you. Like, why do you have to, specifically when people are talking about their achievements, right? And then, of course, I've done the work on that. And it's like, that's not about them. That's not about me. So there's something in me that either wants to be able to talk more freely about what I'm doing, or I just see that and I compare myself to them. And I just think it's really interesting when people can speak of themselves in a way that's interesting, that is of integrity, that is kind to themselves, et cetera, et cetera. Like the way you're talking about yourself now. I'm like, I love this. I don't feel that you're self-righteous, but I do compare myself to other people sometimes who do speak that way. Do people ever talk to you about this in your coaching sessions? Is this something that comes up a lot? And if not, we can go on to the next question, but that's something I was wondering.
Yeah, it's come up a couple of times over the years, but not often. I think the biggest thing when people are coming into coaching with me, they're kind of early into all of this, and they're trying to go to the next level. And so by the time that conversation would even happen, they've already done so much work with me that they're operating through their values. Like they're already like good to go. And then if it happens after that, I just go, okay, cool. Talk to me about where you're at. Why are you operating that way? What are you doing? Right. So it's a great question, but it's not frequent. No.
Okay. That's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. To popcorn around a little bit, and then I want to talk about more of the coaching and how people can work with you. Can you share a little bit more about what it was like at the time of your mother's death? What was that like finding out the news? Where were you? Can you share more about that experience?
Yeah, definitely. So context is everything, right? My mom battled drug and alcohol addiction and prescription drug addiction. I will say this, the prescriptions took her. It wasn't the alcohol. It wasn't the weed. It was those prescriptions. Like I watched her just consume pill after pill after pill. When I was 13 years old, I did something that sounds insane, but I put a restraining order on my mother. Like I foresaw the future of continuing to be in connection with her in the scope that I was. And I said, you know what? I don't want you to be my mom anymore. And that was difficult at that age, right? By the time I was 18, she had kind of had some bouts of sobriety, right? I think I was 16, 17, she had started to step into some of these bouts of sobriety. And then as I headed into 18, that final semester of high school, my grandmother, and this is how I understood everything I needed to understand about my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother let my mom move into her house. My grandmother adopted me. And my mom was sober when she moved in. About 3 weeks later, she wasn't anymore. And I was like, I understand this. I see where this is from. And that's because, again, this is generational trauma. My grandmother was super abusive to her emotionally, mentally, right? And so at 18, as I'm heading into the end of my senior year, not graduating and all the chaos that was around me at that time, my mom, in one of these drug-induced comas, attacked me in the middle of the night. And the next day, before she started getting trashed, I went into her bedroom and there were just all these bottles of alcohol everywhere. just hidden, pill bottles, alcohol bottle, the whole nut, like addiction 101. You know what I mean? And I told her, I was like, I'm never going to talk to you again. And I meant it. And until the day she died, I only saw her one time. And she died when I was 24. So my brother calls me and he goes, hey man, just want to let you know mom died. And I said, thanks. And I hung up the phone and I sat there. And for the first time in my life, I felt peace. And that's a thing that people don't really understand or maybe even understand how to take. And that's why I created that context. Because ultimately I looked at my life at 13 and then again at 18. There is a 0% chance I would be talking to you right now if I did not make those choices. There is no question asked, none. And so because of that, the thing that I'm always thinking about, the people in our lives, there are people in our way who do not want the best for us, or because of their own pain, can't get out of their own way and thus are pulling you down. And sometimes that person is your mother. And that's hard. There's nothing easy about what I just said. To this day, that is the hardest decision I've ever made in my life. Nothing. Even though my mom abused me, even though she cut my finger off, even though she forced us into poverty and being homeless, she was still my mother. But on that day, that night, 18 years old, I said enough is enough. And the peace that came from that decision 6 years later, to this day, I cannot explain to you what that was like. It was like just a backpack of bricks being taken off of me. And in that moment, my brother calls me, hang up the phone. I feel this moment of peace. It just hit me so hard. I was like, this is what it's like when people don't heal.
Wow. I am so grateful that you shared that here. I know that will absolutely resonate with listeners specifically who have lost someone to addiction or alcoholism. I want to take this moment to say, what advice might you have for someone whose own parent or sibling is struggling with addiction or alcoholism? How might they take that next step towards taking care of themselves?
Yeah, look, I think that's always one of the most difficult questions to answer, because ultimately you have to understand something really important about life. You're the only one in control of your future. And those people in your life, be it your sister, your husband, your mom, your best friend, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who it is. You're going to have to make a choice and a decision. People will never get help until they're ready to get help. I go look at my life, 20 through 25, 26 years old, disaster. I mean, there's an analogy I used in my book. It was like standing inside of my house while it burned down and I was holding the matches. And you look at that and you go, I was that person, right? My little brothers at one point, one of them goes, I'm never talking to you again. You're a disaster. There's nothing anyone can say to someone else to get them to change their life. Nothing. And that's the hard truth of it. And if you're in that place where you're hurting with this, I think confiding in people who are supportive, and even as a sober person, or even if you're not sober, but you're dealing with someone who's an addict, go to AA, go to NA. Like I remember being like 12, 11 years old, I would go to these AA meetings with my mom, right? And again, I turned to that when I was like 28, 29, 30 years old, just trying to understand it better. I never thought I was an addict. I still to this day don't. I was just hurt. I was just stuffing things down. And so there are people in your life, they're hurt like me or like my mother, stuffing this down. Alcoholism is a byproduct of abuse and trauma. You can go measure it almost to a T. You find an alcoholic, you find someone who's going through that, they had a tremendous amount of pain in their life. And because of that, the thing that you have to understand is that hurt doesn't go away until they start to heal. So you can be mad, you can be hurt, you can be upset, you can yell at them, you can pack the house and take the kids, you can do whatever it is that comes along with it. But until they make the choice to heal, it's not going to change. And that's the hardest part about it. We want the people in our lives to be healthy. We want them to be loved. We want them to know that we support them. But you know what's easier than facing the demons inside of you? Getting drunk, putting a needle in your arm, popping pills, having sex with strangers on the street. It's easier, I promise. I've done it all. I didn't put needles in my arm for context. But reality is, you have to understand that. And I wish it weren't the case. I wish I could look at people and go, you don't have to be this. But then you have to face the darkness.
I appreciate your honesty, and I think it's helpful to hear, and it is true. It's so true that you're the only person who can take charge of your own life, as much as it feels better or easier to blame someone else or wish that someone else would help you. I think that's something that I resonate with. Like, I know that I'm in control. I know that it's up to me, or, maybe not so much anymore, but maybe 5-6 years ago, I would really think, and it would be so great if someone would reach out and help me and find me and just like take my career or whatever it is to the next level, because yes, it's me, but like, what if someone could really just overnight speed up the process a little bit? And look, we're human. Of course, it's lovely when you do receive that kind of help, but I think that the distinction is removing yourself from needing that. Like, yes, like that would be cool, but that's not what this is about. You're in charge of your own life, and it is up to you to change your future, not someone else, and certainly not overnight. That was my tangent of the day of where I was going with that.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. And like, that's the reality, that's again, removing yourself from this notion. I tell people all the time, ain't nobody coming to save you. There is no Disney moment. Whatever that thing is that you're hoping is going to happen is not coming. You have to create it.
I love that. What about for the few people who, so I'm going to just defend one example and see what you have to say, because I feel like you'll have something interesting to say. So for instance, in like entertainment, there are these overnight success stories of, look, I'm a huge believer of it takes your whole life to become an overnight success. I'm obsessed with that quote. But once in a while, like I do know someone who like books a life-changing role in a TV show seemingly overnight without training or experience. I will say the older I get, the more I realize that is rare. But when it does happen, or let's say for another context, someone gets a big job promotion or wins the lottery, what is your take on that? Like, are those people just lucky? Are they an example to the rest of us? Is it their destiny? What do you think?
I just, what does that have to do with you?
Yes, I knew there would be a nugget of wisdom in here. Thank you.
I'm just like, it's serious. What does that have to do with Chelsea? All right, great. Let's say I won an Oscar. What does that have to do with you?
Not much.
Unless we're married to each other and you're there to celebrate with me. You're my best friend. You're having dinner with me at the awards. What does that have to do with you?
Right.
Nothing.
Nothing. Mm-hmm.
Right? Comparison is the thief of joy, as they say. Look, it's easy. I look at, there's a magazine in front of me. It's a copy of Success Magazine. And it has on the cover up Trent Shelton, Marie Forleo, Rachel Hollis, Prince A.E., Tom Bilyeu, Brendan Burchard, people who are in my space, who I consider peers. Many of them I've worked with one-on-one. I'm not on the cover of Success Magazine, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to try. And if Prince, who just made one video that went so freaking viral, it changed the world, the part that you didn't see were the 397 videos he made before that didn't.
Right.
So I just go, keep going.
I love that. Well, I'll bring it back to you, because now we're going into my own things. Those are the things that I really like to talk about with like coaches and stuff, because it just really interests me. I'm like, but okay. Anyways, also, by the way, side moment, it started raining in Los Angeles during our interview. I'm not going to look into it, but I'm just going to say that like never happened. So if we believe in something, I don't know. I'm just going to leave that in there. Might cut that out, but it is raining. It never rains, literally ever. So I wanted to tell you.
Well, like they say, rain on your wedding day is good luck. So
yes.
maybe rain on your podcast is good luck, which is also a great name for a podcast. Rain on your podcast.
Yes, that's your next podcast. I feel like you secretly are like brewing up like 3 more podcasts. Like I feel like you're gonna like have like 6 podcasts somehow.
Yeah. If I didn't have to do it all, well, I don't. I have a team, but if I had more time, I'm actually working on a new business that's about to come out that is it's going to be life-changing for people. So
No big deal. Okay, well, I need to ask you about that immediately. So,
I'll
but
have to
wait.
tell you off air. There's
Okay.
contracts and things involved. So
Okay, love that. Sorry, listeners, you will not know, but it sounds
I'll come back
fantastic.
on and we'll talk about it.
Okay, yes, for the next press round for your next project. Very cool. So, because it is the Dying of Laughter podcast, is there a comedic moment that has surrounded your story with grief or your story with life or something so bizarre, unusual, or random that you just had to laugh? This could be pertaining to your story with grief or as part of your healing journey since. If not, we can also go to the next question.
I don't get to share this very often, but I actually kind of cut my teeth in being a public speaker in stand-up comedy. I have been doing,
No way.
I've been doing and people are probably listening like, this guy's not funny. This is the least funny episode of all time. Context, right? And so I love stand-up comedy since I was a child, like obsessed with it. Still to this day, I am. I'm freaking obsessed. And so my comedy tends to err on the side of darkness. And the fun, like, it's just, there's so much irony in life where you go, what the fuck? How is this even happening? Right. It's so asinine. I can't believe this is happening right now. So it's Thanksgiving. I'm 18 years old. This is around the time that my grandmother let my mom move back in. There's this girl whose name I won't mention, who I have a huge crush on. I finally get her to come over to my house on Thanksgiving. Finally. Chelsea, I have been trying to go on a date with this girl. So what happened our sophomore year, I told the guy, I asked permission, trying to be a nice guy that she was seeing. Hey, do you mind if I see her? We're in high school. Obviously, you guys aren't getting married. He goes, sure. That night, they get back together. He like backstabbed me. So a couple of years go by, and I finally get her to come over. It's Thanksgiving. We're standing in the kitchen. She's been in my house 36 seconds. And my mom, wasted out of her fucking mind, comes out of her bedroom, butt naked, and sits down. And I swear to God, you cannot make this up. Sits down at the kitchen table, passes out face first in the mashed potatoes.
Stop.
And this girl looks at me, and she looks at and she just walks out the door. I was fucking mortified. How you'd never like there was no that. Yeah. So that was the end of that.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that, because that is like, you cannot even make this stuff up, right?
I'm telling you, when I make a movie, I'm putting that in the movie, and people are gonna be like, that's not real. I'm like, ask my brother. He was right there. I promise you it was real.
Oh my gosh. And that would be a good anecdote for stand-up. I mean, I could totally actually see you doing stand-up. The thing is, it's more like it's a cousin of public speaking, and then it's like you have to choose at some point like which one you want to be like the master of, right? But they are related.
And that's what happened. Yep.
Yes. But I mean, maybe you could have just because I also love stand-up. I'm just like, maybe you could have a stand-up moment, just like have a 5 to 10 minute set that you do sometimes and just see.
Oh, I got it on deck, ready to go.
Oh, you do? Oh my goodness. Do you ever perform in Portland? I'm like,
yeah.
Is this happening? You do?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I didn't know that.
Keeps me. Look, here's the thing. I'll tell you this, no joke. Doing stand-up in front of 17 people is so much more terrifying than standing up in front of 10,000. Not even close. Not even on the same window.
That's amazing. I mean, right? There is something to say about smaller crowds. I mean, you make eye contact. They're all right there. They're looking at you. And
they're all waiting for you to make them laugh. Funny guy.
Yes. Well, that's totally. Well, that's what's kind of cool about public speaking. I mean, it's interesting. I know you have a ton of experience with public speaking. I have more experience with stand-up and now starting to do public speaking. I almost feel like
what's cool about public speaking to me is I could sneak in a lot of jokes and it's not expected. So like if I decide to go a funnier route, people are like pleasantly surprised, almost more so because they're not expecting it. Whereas stand up, like it's a given. You have to have a punchline like every 10 seconds. Stand up people or like public speaking people are like, that was funny. Wow. And they're surprised. I'm like, thanks. But it's also more freeing because I think with public speaking, sometimes you have the freedom to use impact in a different way, right? You can talk more about like your business or social change or things that you want to get across, whereas stand up, you can't always do that. You can, but then it also becomes kind of this other thing. Like they're a political stand up person now. And you're like, whereas public speaking, they don't make it such a thing. It's just like you're speaking your truth and you're able to impact people. I don't know. Does anything I'm saying resonate? Now I'm going into a tangent.
Yeah, no, it's funny because like doing stand up, like I'm in the camp of the Anthony Jeselniks, the Dave Attell's. I like cutting dark jokes, and my life is cutting and dark. And so when I bring a parlay of those two worlds into my public speaking side, and I get people to laugh, it helps diffuse the tension of the room.
Yes.
Right. And so I would say that it's actually an incredible trait. It's a skill to have. Because people hear this and they go, dude, that was so dark and so heavy, but I laughed so hard when you said that thing about being David Goggins' brother. Right. And so if you know David Goggins, he's the only guy probably had a worse childhood than me. Right. And so in that personal development arena, that name, the room just like dies laughing. Right. But no pun intended. And so,
I love dying of laughter moments. Here from all.
So, I think that there's something interesting about, and I think if you can turn your pain into humor because you've healed it, it makes it easier to talk about. It makes you more relatable. Nobody wants to hear your sob story. Sorry. Even mine. Like I know people are listening to this like, dude, like, geez, write a Lifetime television movie. I'm going to, I promise you. And like, I think about that a lot. It's like, if you can disarm people with a joke, like it matters.
Yes. Now I need to see your stand-up. Also, your public speaking. Also, are they the same thing? I don't know. Need to have a moment. Do you do tours? Like, do you do speaking tours? Or I know with COVID, probably not. Like, is that something you'd aspire to?
I had 20 cities before COVID.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I was just going to self-pay it and, book all these, Holiday Inn airport rooms and, get
nice
18 people to break even and start really creating that momentum. And now I'm just like, so you get it.
Yeah. It's like when the time is right. It's like, it's not quite the time. Like do the podcast now.
Yeah. But I've done huge Zoom rooms and I've done, Zoom has been great. Like it hasn't interrupted my speaking career at all, but it's not the same. It's just not.
Totally relate with Zoom stand-up. Like, I mean, I did it to keep it fresh and there were some really pleasant, surprising things to it, but you're right. It's not the same.
The only comparison I could make to it would be like wanting to enjoy the rain, but you're standing outside in a plastic bag.
That's hilarious to me. That's hilarious to me. Or like watching cooking shows, but you're in a cave and like you have no ingredients and like you're watching like the butter like melt down the popcorn and you can't like take a bite. So you're just like, I mean, this was cool, but like, was it?
Yeah.
Can you talk about, Michael, what is it like to work with you? How can people hire you? And what does that experience look like?
Yeah, I've never worked with me, so I don't know. But I will say this. There's a couple of things that people need to know. When you come into coaching with me, I'm not here to be your friend. I'm not here to coddle you. I'm not here to hold your hand. I'm here to coach you. I'm here to help you make your life better.
I'm a little scared in a good way. Is that the goal?
No, I don't. There's nothing to be scared. I lay it out
Okay.
all up front.
Okay.
You go, there's dozens and dozens of testimonial videos on my website of people who are like, that's the thing I needed to hear. I'm just not going to sugarcoat it, Chelsea. You want sugarcoating? Go, I don't know. Go ask somebody else. I ain't your guy. Because guess what? Life is not sugarcoated. It will chew you up and spit you out, as the old adage goes. And you have to ask yourself this question. This is a real question if you ever do something with me. Am I taking care of myself or am I taking it easy on myself? Because if you're in the camp of taking it easy on yourself, I'm not your guy. Because I'm going to push you. I'm going to make you ask yourself hard questions and do difficult things and make the difference in your life become your reality and measure yourself against your capability and instill the beliefs in you based off of I am the kind of person who is kind to myself and put you through this extensive training, right? It's like, it's a montage, it's Rocky IV. It's Rocky running in the freezing cold snow of Russia to go and fight Drago, because at the end of the day, that's what it is. You're in a fight for your life. Are you going to train for it? Are you going to show up for it? Or are you going to not win? And so if you're in this place, and look, compassion over everything, empathy over everything, you have the space to come in, be a human being. I want to connect with you, but I'm not going to let you take it easy. Because I will replace you with somebody. I literally have fired clients before. This is going to blow people's mind because people in this space will not talk about this. I have fired clients before because they weren't willing to do what I told them. Because I'll tell you right now, on the backside, there is somebody else who's begging me to come into a program, who can't wait for you to be out. And so that's difficult because people go, well, you're a trauma coach. You're supposed to be nice. I never said I wasn't kind. It's one of my values. Kindness is a part of who I am, but honesty is number one, right? And so in the hierarchy of that, I'm going to be honest. You're not taking care of yourself. You're not showing up. You're making excuses. You're not doing what you said. What are you doing? And on the other side, you're doing a phenomenal job. So how do you go to the next level? I saw that you did that. I saw you post that thing that was scary on social media. Congratulations. I saw that you sent me that text about that hard decision you made. Phenomenal. How do we build momentum? How do we keep creating action? How do we make meaning of this moment, right? How do you keep going to where you can be? And so for me, it's like, again, you looked at my life, you said, I've done all these successful, amazing things. Well, it's only a measure of what I'm capable of doing with the information that I have. And so when I have somebody give me new information, I go, oh my God, I've been thinking so small. Oh my God, I cannot believe how small I've been thinking. Go bigger, go harder, create more impact. But also, this is where it gets interesting because people go more and more and more, but everyone's always telling me to rest. Ask yourself this question. Am I taking care of myself or am I taking it easy on myself? Because they're not the same thing. And so when you come into this with me, particularly, because I can't speak for anyone else, that's the preface. Because if you're only interested in hanging out on the couch and doing yoga and getting Reiki, I'm not your guy. But if you're willing to sit down and framework what it takes to go and create a fucking amazing life, and you're willing to step into the arena and say, I need guidance from someone who's only just a step in front of where I want to be, and you're willing to come through, then I'm willing to hold your hand. Think about it like this, Chelsea. If you have to drive through a tunnel, wouldn't you rather have someone holding your hand? And that's what this is. We're just going through tunnel after tunnel after tunnel after tunnel after tunnel. And at the end of every tunnel, there's a little bit of light. But I promise you, the longer you drive, there's going to be another tunnel. So we keep driving through them. We keep going through it together. But you have an option. You can drive through the fucking tunnel, or you can stand on the outside of it and look at your life and go, maybe tomorrow. Not for me. Not my life. And I'm always like, tomorrow ain't fucking promised, so do something.
Everyone listening basically now needs to hire you immediately, if not sooner. Myself included. When do we start? Is our session now? Is this happening? What are you charging?
Right now.
PayPaling you right now. No, this was really, really helpful and interesting. I'm really excited to have gotten to hear from you and getting to hear from where you've come from as to where you are now. Everything that you stand for, everything that you're continuing to show up for is extremely impressive. And I have no doubt that you'll get to where you want to be / you're already there in my mind. You got your dream. You did the podcast. It only took 7 years. You're crushing it. You had the moment. Michael, do you have any closing thoughts for our listeners, and where can people connect with you online?
Yeah, no, this is phenomenal. Thank you. I love the questions. I love the back and forth. It's been wonderful. I'm at Michael Unbroken everywhere on all the things. But the Think Unbroken podcast, which Chelsea has been an amazing guest of, is at thinkunbrokenpodcast.com. It is on all the platforms, Think Unbroken Podcast. I tell people all the time, if you just listen to the podcast, you don't have to get coaching with me. Just go listen to the podcast. It's all value. It's there for a reason.
It really is a bunch of free coaching if you think about it.
Yeah,
it really
it's
is.
literally what it is. And every Friday I release just me. And there's a lot of things in the work over there. But, you know, the thing I'll leave people with that I think is really profound that just struck me one day, it became really the entry to my book and to a lot of the things that I've done in my life, is this very simple concept. Though trauma may be our foundation, it is not our future.
Fucking beautiful. Michael, this was awesome. It's going to get a bajillion downloads. Not that that's the goal, but thanks to you. It's happening. Everyone's listening. Everyone's downloading. Everyone's sharing it with a friend. They're just inspired. Like, thanks to you. So thank you for being here again. It was really, really, really amazing.
Anytime, my friend. Thank you.
Yodo, you only die once.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us. That was a really powerful conversation. You guys inspire me every single day. And by being here, it means a lot to me. I'm an indie show. And if you liked what you've listened to, you could share this episode with a friend, or writing a review on Apple Podcasts helps boost the algorithms. And that means a lot to me. It's one of the greatest gifts you can give to a solo entrepreneur. So thanks for your consideration there. And be sure to come back next week as we explore psychedelics for grief with Rabbi Sydney Mintz. It's really, really interesting. If you've ever wondered what psychedelics for grief might look like, this is the episode for you. She also talks about growing up with abusive parents and living with 30 families growing up, and so much more. So I'll see you next week. And remember, everyone, Yodo, you only die once.